Though there was something so fascinating and absorbing to my engaged mind that I frequently longed to reproduce its unearthly music and sights. R.B. Stratton. This is AMI Audiobook Review. I'm your host, Jacob Shemansky, with Ramya Amuthan. Rams, that quote reminds me of the flow state. Has it ever happened to you when you're working on something and you get so absorbed into it that you neglect everything else, your relationships, you don't check your texts, you don't think about eating or drinking, you're just, because you realize you're in that flow state, you neglect everything else. In a weird way, it's amazing. It feels great, but it's also bad for you because you're not eating, you're not talking to people.
Yeah, it's hard to get me to not think about eating or whatever, but it's interesting you thought about flow state. I think of flow state as what you're describing, but more activity-based, right? Like you're in the middle of a video game, or you're in the middle of like an athletic endeavor or a creation of some sort, like creating
being
art.
Productive.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. It's
and
like
you can be
nice,
productive when you're doing
challenging
something
state.
creative, right? If
the right balance of creativity and challenge is what I think like the gist of flow state
exactly.
is. Right.
And if you get the equilibrium between those two, creativity and challenge, you get that zone. Flow state. Yeah.
But the way that I took this quote is not this at all. I just was thinking of not necessarily a spiral state, but just when you're just with your thoughts. You're just floating in your thoughts and time is going and you have no idea what, like you've just gone from thought to thought to thought to thought and you're in your head fully.
Here it is again. Though there was something so fascinating and absorbing to my engaged mind that I frequently longed to reproduce its unearthly music and sights. To me, what I'm hearing is I've been in that flow state and I want to get there again, right? Though there was something so fascinating and absorbing to my engaged mind.
But that could be intellectuality, right? It could be philosophy. It could be just thought processes, like observation of where your mind can go. Does it have to
You're
be...
like fascinated by your own thoughts,
sure,
by the mechanics of your own brain.
You're philosophical. Yeah.
I mean, that's what philosophy is. It's the thought of thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are we talking about today? I hope it's someone very thoughtful.
Of course it is. So today we have a guest joining us, and it's actually a friend of the network, so we're welcoming her back. She's joined us on earlier seasons of AMI Audiobook Review with myself and Nisreen Abdelmajid. She's come on Kelly and Ramya, on Kelly and Company to recommend books. We've roped her into book club more than once before, and that's Kathrine Vatcher. So she's back. Nice to have you on today.
Hello, everybody.
More fresh perspectives and, of course, recommendations, but also for rapid fire review, which is, it's the first time we're doing this with you.
Yeah, it is.
And the way I've explained it, you're already nervous about it. Sorry about that.
Very, yes, that's fine.
Well, for the people
the
who...
heart pumping, right?
Exactly.
Oh, it honestly does. It's a little stressful, and we kind of like it that way because we like to keep you on your toes. For the people who don't know, Rapid Fire Reviews are a segment where our guest, today it's Kathrine Vatcher, brings us 5 of their most recent notable reads, and we'll go through them one by one. We'll read the title and the author, and then after you hear the author, you'll hear a ticking sound effect for the last 15 seconds. During that 15 seconds, you have to give us your review synopsis thoughts in 15 seconds. We do that for 5 books, and at the end, you get to pick one to further elaborate on. The point is to go through recommendations and also just get an idea of your personal taste and style, Kathrine.
Under pressure.
Does that sound good? Under pressure.
Oh, that sounds good. Under pressure.
Now, before, because it has been a while since we had you on the show, so before we get into rapid fire review, any general scope of what your reading's been like? You read a lot, but like, have you been reading anything particular?
My reading has been historical.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, it seems like I don't know. I'm just stuck in this history love of books that I want to read about back in the 1800s, the early 1600s, whatever it is.
Okay.
More so history and true story.
You use the word stuck. That has negative connotations.
I know. I thought about that as I got it out of there too. I'm thinking, love of. How about that?
Oh, okay.
Love of history.
You are comfortably in a rabbit hole.
Yes. With my cozy little blanket.
Okay.
and my bunny slippers, and I'm reading historical
History.
books.
Yeah.
Here we go. Here we
What do
go.
you like
Interesting.
about history? Why do you read history?
I don't know. When I was in a school, like as a kid, I did not like history at all. Now it's like I want to know where we all came from. What have what has happened
Huh.
before and how we're getting there, or something like that. That's what it feels like. That's where I'm going.
Some kind of learning or
Yeah,
self-discovery, maybe.
yeah, probably.
I
Okay.
Yeah,
mean,
that's what I
history
think.
books often highlight the way, like, the reason why things are today,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Should we get started?
Yep.
Everybody good?
Sure. Let her go.
Okay. Rami, I'm electing you to read the first one.
All right, thank you. So here is book 1 of Kathrine Vatcher's most recent reads, Sold on a Monday, Kristina McMorris.
The setting for this book is in the 1940s when in the United States when people were dealing with recession, not having anything enough to eat. Parents were having to make not strict, but making hard choices.
Ooh.
So, dealing with
So how do you
poverty,
want me?
which
Yeah,
recession? Was that the 30s? Oh, 15 seconds was not enough for that.
it's the 40s. It's just after the war. How
Okay.
do you want me to start that again? Or are
No,
we
this
done?
is great. This is
No,
good.
this is the
Okay.
point. Yeah,
We'll,
this is good.
yeah.
This is good.
You only
Oh,
get the
got it.
15 seconds.
Yeah.
I
Now,
just give you a taste.
you give me a taste, and it'll get better. By the 5th book,
Okay.
you'll give us a real taste. But
Yep.
this did sound interesting, though, because you mentioned parents and children, so I'm curious about that friction.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
the friction where kids kind of expect a certain lifestyle, but the parents can't give it because of financial realities.
Yes.
That's something that's increasingly relatable to Canada in 2025, to be honest. Okay, moving on to the next one. We have The Tide Between Us by Olive Collins.
The setting for this one is in 1891. Irish children were being sold to slavery into Jamaica for the sugar plantations.
What?
They were,
Really?
yes, they were.
Whoa.
And they were 14
I had no clue.
Hey, you guys finish that
No,
thought. They
finish
were
your thought.
what?
Finish your thought.
14 hours a day they were working on these sugar plantations.
Well, this is backwards. That's why we
I've-
get a deep dive into history, I guess.
Well,
Yeah.
I've never heard of this.
There's so many things that we're not aware of because these are hidden things in history. Things that
Did
are
you say
pushed under the mat.
sold into
Sold
slavery?
into slavery.
Irish children
Yes.
into
Irish
slavery
children.
into Jamaica.
Yep. Yep.
I
Yep.
wonder.
Wow.
Okay, I wonder. Moving to the 3rd book, The Dressmakers of Auschwitz by Lucy Adlington.
This novel was written in or based in the 1940s during the war, the Holocaust, in Germany. And these are dressmakers that were making dresses,
See?
seamstresses, and they were doing it to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I had to look this one up when I saw this on the list. It was about a group of women in Auschwitz that were sewing like really fancy, beautifully sewn dresses for like the
Yes.
elite of the Nazi
Yes.
class while they were
Yes.
in Auschwitz. So
Yeah.
interesting, like completely true story as well.
Yeah.
Aren't these all nonfiction
Yeah.
so far? Okay.
So far there, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Catherine, you've really got a style. All right, let's move on to this next one. Here it is. It's Captivity of the Oatman Girls by R.B. Stratton.
Yes, this one is a very difficult read. It was setting was in 1851. It's about a family traveling from California, and they were attacked by the Apache Indians, and 7 of the 9 family members were murdered.
Wow.
Yes,
And
that was very hard, wasn't it?
7 of the 9. What
7
about the
of
last?
the 9.
What about the last?
The
two?
last, well, actually, 3 first. It was 7 of the 9. It says they were murdered, but one of the brothers escaped. He pretended that he was dead, and he escaped, but nobody knew that he was still alive. And 2 of the daughters, the younger ones, were captured by the Apache Indians. One passed away from starvation, and the other one, her and her brother, after a little while, after years, they kind of during their time dealing with what they were dealing with, they wrote their memoirs, and this is the book about how they
Oh.
survived and their life in this time. Is Yeah, it's a lot of pretty graphic,
But based on first-hand
based on
accounts.
first-hand account that they were writing of their life and what
Oh,
they
wow.
endured. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, let's get to the final one and then we'll deep dive. All these are very difficult reads, it sounds. Okay, Carleys' voice, breaking
But
through
big eye
autism.
openers. Big eye openers.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the last one for rapid fire review, at least, is Carleys' voice, breaking through autism by Arthur Fleischman.
This one is about a girl who has autism. Her and her sister siblings, they were twin, and Carley was the firstborn, and she has autism. The second sister was very quiet. This is her firsthand story about she has no voice because she's not a verbal person. So this is her internalizing and how she's able to write of her life and what she's saying. So reading this, it was opening my eyes because you see these people with different disabilities, whatever, and you're forgetting that they are a person on the inside. So this is Carley on the inside, and it's giving her the voice of who she is and what. This is why it says Carley's voice. This is her voice in writing.
Yeah.
I've always felt a lot of empathy for people who have speech impairments, especially people who are mute, because they're
Yes.
perfectly able and perfectly
Oh,
normal. But people make assumptions that because you can't talk, then you don't have thoughts. And obviously,
yes.
that's not the case.
Very incorrect.
We are flummoxed when we can't verbally communicate.
Yes.
Yes.
And even that in itself there's so much to understand about communication being more than just verbal, right? Like
course.
physical presence and everything else, and impressions of what communication is or who you are is a lot of the time not even verbal. But like you said, Jacob, as soon as the verbal's taken out, you think, this person has nothing to offer.
Yes. That's what many people think, which is very untrue.
Yeah,
And
and-
imagine the frustration that when you
Yes.
have thoughts and you really
Oh,
want to get them
yes.
out there, you just can't.
Yeah, like
Yes.
what is your identity, right? It's
Yep.
a huge thing to explore. So, are you? Which one of these books did you most recently finish, Catherine?
The Sold on a Monday is the one I'm almost
Wrapping
all
up?
done. That's the
Okay.
one that is intriguing me at the moment.
Okay, I'm curious about what you think of Sold on a Monday. Then let's start there.
How would you think the Sold on a Monday? What do you think that would be about? Have any thoughts? Just looking at the book and saying sold on a Monday. Sold the newspaper, sold what? Right? So you look at that and you think, oh, well, I wonder what this is about. So I open the book and I'm looking at it, or doing an audible, and I'm listening to it as I'm driving or whatever. And it's about this gentleman and another lady who's in a newspaper back in the 1940s, and he needed to find a picture to make a story because he was just on the sidelines. He wasn't getting a lot of stories. So he seen these two children sitting on their porch with a sign on them. The children probably like 4 and 5 years old, with a sign written on a piece of wood, "Children for sale."
Oh.
So he snapped this picture and he's thinking, wow, it really resonated with him. What does this mean? He didn't talk to the children or anything. He just had that picture. So then he formed his own opinions of what this meant, because a lot of people were losing their jobs because the recession hit, because of the war. People did not have enough food, so they were trying to find other avenues on how to buy food for their family or to pay their bills or whatever the scenario was. So he took this picture and he wrote the article, but the picture got damaged. So he had to come up with another picture. He goes back to the place of the house. The children are no longer there. So he's like, oh my goodness, the children are gone. But then there was another sister and another brother. So I'll rig this. He decides, I'm going to make this picture my own. So I'll stage the picture. So he
Jeez.
staged, a little boy and another little girl, siblings of the other two that were already gone. And he asked them, um, "Can I take your picture?" "Well, you have to ask my mother first." So he asks the mother. The father already passed away years before that, so it's just the mother now trying to raise. At this point, now it's four children that we're aware of, and two are gone, so there's two left. So they get the two children, take the picture, and he paid them $2 for the picture, and all was well. So people started, after the article went out, people started sending donations because his article was about the effects of the recession, the effects of the war, the effects of all these things on family life and what we're to do. So people started sending donations, food, money, clothing, whichever, to the news, um, the place of business, the news business, and this gentleman was dropping them off in the nighttime, hoping that no one saw him. Anyway, long story short, we get going into the middle now. We find out the mother, when they talk to the mother a few months later, they found out that the mother was dying with what they thought was with tuberculosis. And a banker came and bought the other two children, and they went to California. So now this was in Philadelphia. So it's like all these things going, just as you think you know what the plot is going to be,
It
and
twists
another,
and turns.
yes, it twists and turns, and it's funny. Some parts in the reading were funny because the lady and the gentleman at the news place, they were starting to get eyes for each other, and then another gentleman comes in, and it was all these twists and turns all the way through, and I'm like at very end of the book now, and I'm just holding on and holding on. I'm not going to let you know what's going on because there's so many more twists into this. It's like, wow, this is keeping me going and going. And I'm listening to this book in my car. My grandchildren are there. What is this you're listening to, Nan? So I'd say I'm listening to this audiobook so that I they know about an audiobook now and you can listen to it in the car. And
Mm,
it's like, wow, we're opening a whole new world for these little kids, how to read things, but
yeah.
this is a really cool book. It keeps you going, and there's some humor in there. There's a couple not nice words, but it's very limited. It's not a lot of that.
Do you have comparisons of this book to other things you've read that you've really enjoyed, or does it like meet the mark of what it's supposed to be doing?
I think it's meeting the mark. It's more than what I thought it would be. I thought it would just be a basic, simple, like, just an ordinary book, like
Right.
not with a lot of twists and turns and plots moving here and there. It's like it'll keep you going. It'll keep you on your edge of your seat for sure.
There are some books like this one that have a lot of twists and turns that it's not the plot twists exactly.
Uh-huh.
It's that the book
Yeah.
doesn't go where you expect it to. Where
Exactly. Yeah.
you can be 25% through a book and you'd be like, oh, I'm gearing up for adventure of type A. But then come
Uh-huh.
50% of the book, you're like, oh wow, it's not what I
It's not at
expected
all.
at all. It's like sometimes it feels like an entirely different book. It just
Yes.
Than when it started.
again, it's reflective of life. Sometimes you don't really know where you're gonna end up.
Oh, for sure, for sure. You think your life is going to turn out one way, but then something happens and you're in left field over here. Like, how did I get over there?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
just like it's just normal, every day. Here we go. You
So
know?
that's sold on a Monday with
Yes.
Kristina McMorris. What's from the other four reads your top pick?
I think Dressmaker of Auschwitz is my top
Okay,
pick on that one.
that's
It's
Lucy
it's
Adlington.
yes, that's about the dressmakers in Auschwitz, how um they had something bad that they were dealing with. Not bad, like it was a horrendous time in history, horrendous time in their lives and many others, and how they did what they had to do to stay alive. What they, you know, even though it was hard for them to be making fancy dresses for these people that were killing their own family, all the US, the not US, the SS soldiers, that they knew what the choice would be if they didn't do these things, that they would be the next one that would be killed, and they had no compassion the soldiers didn't. So they had to be resilient in doing what they did, to be creative, and they would get fur coats and they would make them into fancy things for these women to wear. And yeah, it was just,
The irony
yeah.
and the
It was, yeah,
psychological, yeah,
totally,
effect.
totally.
Now, how was it written? Like in the perspective of whom?
It was one of the dressmakers.
Okay.
It was her perspective, and how made her feel like she was a young woman, and like late teens, I guess, late teens, and she was learning how to sew and things like that. And then the war hit, and then this is the skill that she had, so she honed in on that skill as a way to save herself and save others that were in Auschwitz at the time, and to do, because if she knew that if she could have a skill that was useful to them, that they would keep her alive. Whereas if you were not useful, you were not kept alive. So this was life or death.
They had to
So
turn themselves
yeah,
into commodities, essentially,
exactly.
to have
Yeah.
a skill that they could sell so that they would be made impossible to be
Yes.
expendable, right?
Yes, there's a few of these titles from the Auschwitz. There's a Tattoos of Auschwitz, the
Oh.
Dressmaker of Auschwitz. There's a few of them, and they are all
Huh.
on the first-hand account of that person and what they've. Because
Oh, it's a series.
yeah, there's a bunch of them. Yeah, I just watched the movie, the series, actually, not the movie. It was a series of the Tattoos of Auschwitz, and it was about one of the gentlemen who was tattooing the numbers in their arms.
Oh,
Yeah, but he did that to stay alive, right? They did the dressmaking to make dresses for these upscale people, the soldiers' wives and families, to stay alive. And this is, yeah.
The torture. Do
Oh,
you,
totally.
when you finish reading this book or the other ones from the series, do you feel more or less connected to the situation? Like, you know what I mean? When we're reading history, it's just so far from what we're experiencing right now. Like, it's so far
Yeah,
from my personal experience in life. I
for
hear
sure.
stories from my parents who are closer to situations from
Yes.
civil wars and actual war torn, poverty and things like that,
Yes.
and think like I may never actually understand because it's so not what we live through here in North America at this point in time. But I guess the potential of stories is to make you feel like you can understand, like you can empathize or just feel what people are going through.
well,
So
For
what's the
sure.
effect?
it's ironic because it's like two things. One, yes, it does make you understand the situation a lot better, but it also makes you understand how much of a chasm there is between your current
Yes,
situation and back
that's right.
then. It makes you
Yeah.
understand the difference. It's knowing what you don't
You're
know.
yeah.
Yes.
Now, anytime that you're talking about a time period like the Holocaust and what happened in Auschwitz and all the different concentration camps, you have to approach that with care as an
Yes.
author. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
noticed that in a lot of all these 5 books, basically, when we were going through them for RFR, you put a lot of emphasis on the setting. How was the setting treated in this one, The Dressmakers of Auschwitz by Lucy Adlington?
Very well. It gave what, like, it didn't give graphic details, but it was clear and precise on what they were dealing with. Like, it was cold and damp and wet. People had head lice, or people were starving, but it gave you what you needed to see through your mind's eye of the environment that these people were in. It did not sugarcoat it, but it was clear, and very it was very clear that it was in a not so nice place,
It's
if
one
that
of
makes
these
sense.
It does, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's what you see through your mind's eye that translates
Yes.
from the author's words into your mind's eye. So there's a process of
Yes.
interpretation there. Can I ask about Captivity of the Oatman Girls by R.B. Stratton? Because you said that this was another book that was a difficult read. Why was that?
They were a family that were traveling in their stagecoach, and all of a sudden the Apache Indians just came up and they had the machete and they just sliced them, and they said there was blood,
Phew.
and like and the author is successful when they get you into that space. So if they're writing the words that you need to describe this place that they're in, and that's what they did. They were graphic on that. Like there was blood, and there was crying, and there was that kind of feeling. So I was reading, and I'm into that, into the space. It was like of course, I could not feel exactly what they felt at that time, but I could have the compassion of what she would be feeling, watching her family being cut up and being removed, and her brother thinking he was dead, and then she's taken away and captured, her and her little sister. Then her sister is not getting enough food, and her sister's starving, and she's crying within herself, because if she cried out loud, then they would they were not very nice to them. They were very mean to them. So they're bringing you into that. And it was hard at times reading because of those things, because it's hard for us to relate to that at the moment. But in order to get to where the reader wants you to be, the reader wants you to see that this is history. It's a story of someone's life, and we need to give it what it needs to have. Like, this was not okay. A family died because they wanted to better their lives. That's not okay. Same with the dressmakers of Auschwitz. All that was wrong. Like, the whole Holocaust is scary and terrible, but we need to remember these are history. This is our history, and this is what has happened. And we can't let the future generations forget about this.
Yeah.
And
We
I'm
can't
happy.
we can't afford to be disconnected
No.
from these time periods, from other people even. And I've heard fiction, but also nonfiction where a story is told of an individual person. It's especially those that are told from a first person perspective. I've heard them called empathy trainers, because when you're experiencing a book in first person, you're forced to see that world through a character's eyes.
Yeah.
And empathy is understanding another person's perspective. That's all it really is when you boil it down. And so
Yeah.
to read books directly trains your ability to feel empathy for people, to understand people's perspective, because you cannot have empathy unless you understand what people are going through.
Of course not. Of course not. And they endured a lot. Like, all of these books, there's something somebody has endured,
Well, of course.
at the hands of somebody else.
Which is why I
Not
guess
okay.
sometimes it can feel like it's easy to disconnect, because
Oh, of course.
we may feel like we haven't endured a lot,
Yeah, and we stay in our own little bubbles and
course.
keep ourselves safe.
And
Make
it's-
yourself a little grateful, understanding
Yeah.
that we're living
Yeah.
in a time that's never been more stable,
backs
more
of other
peaceful,
people's-
Yeah.
suffering, if you want to put it that way, on the
Yep.
back of other
Yep.
people's suffering.
yeah, 1,000%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very true.
We can be nostalgic about the times where you would gallop on the horse to get from one place to another. But guys, horses suck and cars are so much faster.
Whoa.
Like you,
Have some empathy, Jacob. Come on.
But you got to start from somewhere, right?
exactly. We weren't going to develop cars until we developed the steam engine.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Katherine, I think we're all out of time. I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing these books with us. We're going to make sure that all 5 are in the podcast description, the YouTube video description. Any
Fantastic.
final thoughts before we wrap up?
Everyone just get into a book and just enjoy it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Read more.
Just enjoy it. Read more. Always read more.
Instead of
That's a PSA
listening,
for your grandkids.
Yeah.
Instead of
Exactly.
watching YouTube videos
Exactly.
and TikTok videos, put on a book
Yeah.
about a topic you care about. You're going to thank us later.
For sure.
Ramya,
Aw.
Thank you so much for coming on. Katherine, you're the best. We're hoping to have you on again soon.
It's been a pleasure.
That's all the time we have for this edition of AMI Audiobook Review. You can find a repeat of AMI Audiobook Review on Saturdays and Sundays at 1 p.m. Eastern on AMI Audio. The show is available on your favorite podcast platforms and on YouTube. So you can follow us wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave us a comment. We super appreciate it. I'm Jacob Shamansky. I was with Rami Amathan, and our guest was Kathrine Vatcher. Have a good one.